We already have a sneak peek of how the NBA will look like in the next 5 to 10 years probably, as we've seen phenomenal talents emerge just by looking at recent drafts. And for many fans, top of the list would have to include Luka Doncic, Zion Williamson, Trae Young, or Ja Morant, and the list goes on. But to me, there's one name from the 2018 draft who I think hasn't really been talked about that much despite having real superstar potential and despite having the tools to exceed expectations. And that guy is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder. Well, yeah, he was already amazing as a rookie in LA, but he just took off in the second season after being traded to the Thunder. And that is despite him mostly playing an off-ball role, and I think he had a really very good yet very underrated season. This kid was putting in work under the radar and is definitely a huge part of the Thunder's success, which not a lot of people saw coming, as Shai actually led OKC in scoring with 19 points per game, while also being probably the team's best two-way player. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why he's quite underrated in my opinion. Well, the most obvious one is that he plays for Oklahoma City, but also, I think his game itself doesn't really tend to be part of highlight reels and mixtapes. Well, it's because the kid simply doesn't rely on explosiveness or athletic ability to play his game. Basically, Shai's way of getting buckets doesn't necessarily jump off your screen. And instead, he usually uses a very efficient and methodical way of dissecting defenses, and I think that's what makes him more interesting as a player. But is Shai really a superstar in the making? What actually makes this kid stand out from the rest of his peers? And he's really that good to be the face of a franchise moving forward? What's good guys, it's Rira Balls in here, and in this video, we'll talk about SGA and figure out why he's quite underrated, and we'll try to look at how good he can become in the future. Let's get to it. Shai was drafted 11th overall in 2018 behind other lead guards like Luka Doncic, Trae Young, and Collin Sexton. And just by looking at the roles which he had been taking on the past 2 seasons, it's quite easy to justify why he was drafted outside of the top 10. Plus yeah, he doesn't have the bounce of young stars like Zion Williamson or Ja Morant, and he also lacks the flair of Luka Doncic or Trae Young. But basically, this guy has never been the number 1 option in any of his teams his entire 2 seasons. So I think him being overlooked by a lot of people is because of the lack of opportunity and not because of the lack of ability. Because basically, Luka and Trae were among the top 10 players in the entire NBA in terms of touches per game during the past 2 seasons. While on the other hand, Shai only ranked 4th in touches with the Clippers during his rookie year, and he was only 3rd in touches per game in Oklahoma City last season. And still, he was able to lead the Thunder in scoring while having almost a 9-point scoring jump from his rookie season. So we just gotta wonder, was it possible for Shai to already become an all-star last season if the Thunder's offense was already centered around him and he was utilized as the team's main offensive initiator? Well, I think it's safe to assume that such would have been the case if that happened. Also last season, we saw the kid drop a 20-point, 20-rebound, and 10-assist triple-double, making him the youngest player in the league's history to do that. Well yeah, of course, he wasn't dropping consistent triple-doubles every night, but if any, those numbers are just an indication that Shai can basically do anything well on the floor. Well, would you even expect anything less from a 6'6" lead guard who has a 7-foot wingspan? He's basically a walking mismatch most of the time. But aside from that, the kid has shown that he can also create his own shots, he can facilitate for teammates, he can shoot threes, and because of his frame and length, he's also more than capable of guarding multiple positions. And well, despite being mostly the number 2 guy to Chris Paul last season, he still thrived on his role as a secondary ball handler and playmaker. And if any, this only helped him get better at picking his spots off the ball while learning from one of the best pure point guards in NBA history. But regardless, during those times when he was given the chance to be the primary offensive attacker, Shai didn't really hesitate on attacking the rim because of his natural ability to contort his body and create shots. Well yeah, he's still not a great 3-point shooter as he only made 35% of his attempts last season, but is still making enough to keep defenses honest at least. But overall, having CP3 definitely made Shai an improved spot-up shooter from anywhere on the floor, as he now belongs to the 74th percentile of all NBA players who took spot-up shots, which is a big improvement from his rookie year where he wasn't really a great spot-up shooter. And well, if we're going to break down this kid's game, I think what you'll really notice is that Shai mostly plays at a pace not mostly played by younger guys like him. While most guys in their early playing years usually need to be reminded to slow their game down, Shai is actually the opposite, I think. To me, the key for this kid is control. Yeah, he seems to have a great sense of control to his game at a very young age, while having an unusual amount of calmness for a player with relatively lesser experience. To me, it seems like he just doesn't get fazed by any type of defense, and he's pretty confident with his offensive execution all the time. And what's really interesting is that Shai actually lacks the explosive athleticism that we usually see in superstar players. But I think what he lacks in athleticism, he makes up for it with his craftiness and his ability to utilize space very well. Basically, he has the ability to create his shots off the dribble, to change speed at any time, and to shoot from different angles. And his amazing body control, paired with his unreal wingspan, definitely helps him do these things night in and night out. Also, this guy thrives in isolations because he knows how to identify potential points of attack around him very well. Yeah, he's not the quickest or the most bouncy guard out there. He sometimes even appears to be on slow motion while moving past defenders going to the basket. But because of his length and his ability to use space very well, it's just hard for defenders to keep him out of the lane most of the time, despite him not having the quickest first step. Basically, Shai is just naturally good at finding angles to create shots or to throw passes to open teammates. But I think if any, Shai needs to make quicker decisions while holding the ball moving forward, because as calculated as his moves are, sooner or later, teams are going to double team and trap him more than ever, and that could just lead to turnovers if he doesn't react quickly, and we've seen that happen tons of times this past season. Well, that's the only downside to his slower pace, I think, but as a primary playmaker, you can expect Shai to just get better moving forward. Well, for reference, let's look at probably the most commonly run play in today's NBA, the pick and roll. Well, last season, Shai generated 1.02 points per possession while running the pick and roll, and that production puts him in the 77th percentile of all NBA players. That's way above the league average. Well, basically, he's been very productive with the pick and roll because of his deadly mid-range pull-up jumper and also because of his advanced floater game. And those numbers are actually a very good indication if you're banking on him to be back at playing the point next season now that CP3 is gone. But of course, Shai's game still has obvious loopholes, and to me, for him to be elite moving forward, he needs to improve his efficiency while finishing at the rim. Well, like I said, he has a great floater game, but he still has trouble finishing very close to the basket, and his numbers only belong to the 24th percentile of all players who shot directly at the rim last season. But considering that the guy is only about to enter his third season and it's very likely that he's still going to add a bit more weight, I think he'll be able to absorb more contact pretty soon, and added maturity will only help him better calculate his angles when shooting at the rim over bigger defenders. So basically, with his skill set and his physical tools, I think the sky's the limit for this kid as of now in terms of his ceiling. And actually, if you would like to compare this kid to a star player, not necessarily by playstyle or anything like that, but simply based on a career trajectory, well, I think you can compare Shai's situation to none other than the guy who was traded for him. Yeah, I think his situation is comparable to Paul George during his first few seasons in Indiana. Because if you look at it, Shai basically played as a starter level guy in LA and as a second option at best in OKC behind Chris Paul. Well, PG also played mostly behind Danny Granger in his first 2 seasons in Indy, and in fact, it wasn't until Granger got hurt that PG actually got to really play as a small forward rather than as a shooting guard. And if you compare Shai and PG's numbers after turning 22 years old, well, Shai has averaged 14.5 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 3.3 assists while shooting 36% from deep while playing 30 minutes a game. While on the other hand, PG posted similar averages of 10 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 1.8 assists per game while shooting 35% from deep while playing 25.4 minutes a game. So as you can see, their numbers after turning 22 years old are strikingly similar while not being the clear #1 options for their respective teams. But obviously, Shai has a slight advantage based on these statistics at least, and if you're going to predict his career trajectory based on that, there's no reason not to project him to be at least a multiple-time All-Star. While we don't know if he's ever going to be an All-NBA defender like Paul George, but with his tools, his size and his frame, that doesn't seem to be a reach as well. So yeah, I think OKC got a great gem in SGA, and this is why I think engaging in a tank job isn't actually a viable option for the Thunder next season. Well, basically, with all those picks that they have, it's easy to assume that they would love to lose a ton of games to be able to land top-tier talent through the draft. But come to think of it, the basic point of tanking is to land a young player of Shai's caliber or even greater if you're lucky. But now that you have someone with star potential like him as your team's cornerstone, I think the reasonable thing to do right now is to build around him and to add pieces to promote continued winning. Well, that's just me. That's how I think you can get the best out of your potential franchise player. Sam Presti has all the tools to surround him with talent with all those assets he has acquired, but he can also choose to grind it out via the draft. But the bottom line is that having a player like Shai as a building block gives the Thunder tons of options moving forward. And whether or not OKC hit the jackpot in the draft again, rest assured, Shai is only gonna get better and I expect him to get a max extension next offseason. To put it into perspective, most of the time, we expect young players to be flashy and to jump off the roof as soon as they enter the NBA. Well, yeah, of course, that's exciting and very entertaining, and half of the time, that can guarantee instant success. While you can't expect Shai to shoot 28-foot three-pointers or to jump high enough to catch lobs out of nowhere. But the thing is, he'll still most likely be a superstar in the near future even without doing those things. He's just the type of guy who will slice defenses slowly with 1,000 cuts rather than with one quick slash. He just has his own unique vibe, and honestly, I think that's all he needs to be a great player for many more years to come. Thank you guys for sticking until the end of the video, and feel free to drop a comment below about what you think of SGA. What do you think is his ceiling and how far can he take OKC next season? Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please smash that like button because it helps the channel a lot to be noticed by other fans around the NBA YouTube community. Also, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet because you don't want to miss another fire NBA content which I put out regularly. So again, this is Riraballs and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.